My fiancé left. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply stared at the handwritten note lying on the bridal suite table, while my wedding planner kept asking the same question. Claire, what do you want us to tell the guests? Outside the door, 300 people believed they were waiting for a ceremony. Inside, I was holding a single sheet of paper that ended a 10-year relationship in less than 20 words. I can't do this. Vanessa and I are leaving. Don't look for me. That was it. No explanation. No apology worthy of the damage he'd just caused. Just a goodbye written by a man who couldn't bear to face the woman he'd betrayed. 30 minutes later, everyone would assume I was the biggest victim in the room. They were wrong. The biggest mistake hadn't been Nathan leaving me. It was believing he had ever intended to stay. Exactly 28 minutes before the ceremony, my phone began vibrating non-stop. My mother, my maid of honor, the florist, my father. Then the hotel manager. Nobody knew the truth yet. They only knew the groom had disappeared. I silenced every call. Not because I didn't love them. Because I needed 60 seconds to think before the entire day turned into public humiliation. A soft knock broke the silence. Claire? It was Amelia, my wedding planner. Her voice trembled. The musicians are asking if they should delay. Guests are beginning to notice something's wrong. I folded the note once, then again. Give me 5 minutes. She hesitated. Claire, I'm so sorry. I nodded. So am I. The bridal suite became painfully quiet after she left. My wedding dress hung perfectly against the window. The makeup artist's brushes were still scattered across the vanity. Champagne waited untouched beside 2 crystal glasses. Every detail had been planned for months. Every flower, every song, every menu card. Nathan loved telling people he planned the perfect wedding. The truth? He hadn't chosen a single thing. I'd done all of it. Just like I'd quietly done so many other things during the last decade. People often ask when a relationship started falling apart. They're usually expecting one dramatic answer. An affair, a fight, a betrayal. But relationships rarely collapse in one day. They collapse one excuse at a time. The first time Nathan forgot my birthday, he blamed work. The first time he canceled our anniversary dinner, he blamed investors. The first time he missed my mother's surgery, he blamed a delayed flight. Every excuse sounded reasonable by itself. Together, they built a man who slowly learned I'd forgive almost anything. I should have recognized the pattern 2 years earlier. Nathan loved introducing me at business events. This is Claire, the woman who always believes in me. People smiled. They thought it was romantic. What they didn't hear was everything he never said. He never mentioned that I'd spent countless nights rewriting his presentations. He never mentioned I reviewed every contract before he signed it. He never mentioned that when his first startup nearly collapsed, I quietly mortgaged an apartment I'd inherited from my grandmother to keep the company alive. He liked telling the story where he became successful. He simply edited me out of it. The first person to notice something was wrong wasn't my mother. It wasn't the planner. It wasn't even one of Nathan's friends. It was his older brother, Elliot. He knocked once before stepping inside, still wearing his tailored black tuxedo, still perfectly calm. His eyes found the note in my hand immediately. Then they found my face. Nathan's gone. It wasn't a question. I nodded once. He didn't ask to read the note. He didn't ask if I was okay. He simply closed the door behind him. How long have you known? 7 minutes. He looked at his watch. So he planned this. I frowned. What do you mean? If he'd panicked, he would have disappeared after the ceremony started. He left before guests could see him. His voice stayed calm, almost analytical. He wanted you to deal with the embarrassment, not him. The words hit harder than the note itself, because deep down, I knew Elliot was right. Nathan hadn't just left. He'd carefully chosen the moment that would leave me standing alone in front of 300 people. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Nathan. Not a call, a text. Please don't make a scene. Just tell everyone we both agreed this wasn't right. I read it twice, then laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. He had abandoned me 30 minutes before our wedding, and his biggest concern was protecting his reputation. Elliot watched my expression. What did he say? I handed him the phone. He read the message. His jaw tightened. That was the first emotion I'd seen from him all morning. He still thinks he controls the story. He quietly handed the phone back. Don't let him. Outside the suite, the music suddenly stopped. Not because the ceremony had begun, because people were waiting for instructions. Every passing second made the silence louder. Amelia knocked again. Claire! I can't delay much longer. I looked toward the mirror. A bride. Perfect hair. Perfect dress. Perfect smile. Gone. I expected to feel broken. Instead, I felt strangely clear. Nathan had spent 10 years expecting me to clean up every mess he created. If I canceled the wedding now, everyone would remember the woman whose groom abandoned her. Nathan would disappear with Vanessa. People would invent 100 different stories, most of them blaming me. No, not this time. I slowly picked up my bouquet. Elliot frowned. Claire, what are you thinking? I turned toward him, not panicked, not desperate, just certain. I'm thinking, why should I be the one who runs away? For the first time all morning, Elliot smiled, only slightly. What do you need from me? I looked directly into his eyes, then asked the question that would change every life connected to the Carter family. Elliot, if I walk into that ballroom today, will you walk in beside me? For the first time that morning, Elliot looked genuinely caught off guard. Not shocked, just unprepared. He searched my face as if trying to decide whether grief had pushed me into making an irrational decision. Claire, you don't have to prove anything today. I'm not. I tightened my grip on the bouquet. I'm deciding how this story ends. Outside, someone tested the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony will begin shortly. The announcement echoed through the ballroom. It was a lie, and in less than 5 minutes, everyone would know it. Elliot took one slow step closer. If you walk out there with me, people will assume things. I know. They'll talk. I know. Nathan will use it against you. That made me smile. He already is. I held up my phone. Nathan had sent another text. Please don't embarrass my parents. A second message arrived before I could lock the screen. Tell everyone we mutually called it off. It's cleaner that way. Cleaner. After disappearing with another woman 30 minutes before our wedding, he still wanted me to protect his image. Elliot read both messages. His expression hardened. He isn't asking. He's managing the narrative. Exactly. Nathan had always believed that whoever spoke first owned the truth. Amelia burst into the room without knocking. Her face had gone pale. Claire, the guests are starting to ask questions. Your father wants to come in. Nathan's mother is saying traffic must have delayed him. And she hesitated. Someone just saw Vanessa's bridesmaid room completely empty. The room fell silent. The lie was beginning to collapse on its own. I looked at Elliot. I need one honest answer. You'll get it. If we walk out there together, can you promise me something? What? Don't save me. He frowned. I don't understand. I don't need a hero. I need someone who won't lie. For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then he quietly nodded. I can promise you that. Outside the bridal suite, the atmosphere had changed. Guests were no longer chatting. They were speculating. Where's Nathan? I thought the ceremony started at 2. Has anyone seen the groom? Every unanswered question made the silence heavier. Nathan's mother, Victoria, hurried toward us the moment the door opened. Relief flooded her face. There you are. She grabbed my hands. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. I gently pulled them back. There is. Her smile widened. I knew it. Nathan left. The smile disappeared. What? He isn't coming. Victoria laughed nervously. Claire, this isn't funny. I know. I'm not joking. Before Victoria could respond, Nathan's father arrived. Then my parents. Then Amelia. Within seconds, the hallway outside the bridal suite had become more crowded than the ballroom itself. Everyone talked at once. What happened? Where is he? Did someone call him? Is he hurt? I reached into my bouquet, pulled out the folded note, and handed it to Victoria. She read the first line. Her knees nearly gave out. George caught her before she fell. No, she whispered. My son wouldn't do this. George took the note, read it silently, then closed his eyes. Unlike Victoria, he didn't deny it. He simply looked exhausted. My father stepped toward me. We're leaving. No. He blinked. What? I'm not leaving. Claire, the wedding is over. I looked around the hallway. At 2 families. Dozens of confused faces. A lifetime of whispered gossip waiting to happen. Then I asked a question no one expected. Who says it has to be? Nobody answered, because nobody understood what I meant. Except one person. Elliot. He looked at me for a long moment, then quietly asked, Are you absolutely sure? I met his eyes. No. I'm absolutely certain about one thing. What's that? I'm done letting Nathan decide how every chapter of my life ends. Amelia looked completely lost. So, what do we do? I smiled for the first time that day. Open the ballroom. What? Open the doors. The guests have been waiting long enough. Victoria stared at me. Claire, please don't humiliate my family. I looked at her gently. Your son already did that. I'm just refusing to hide it. The ballroom doors opened. 300 guests turned toward the entrance. The music didn't start. No groom appeared. Only me, walking slowly toward the front, still wearing the wedding dress, still holding the bouquet, completely alone. The whispers stopped. Every eye followed me. Some looked confused, others sympathetic. A few were already reaching for their phones. I stopped in front of the altar, picked up the microphone. For a brief moment, the room was perfectly silent. I could have lied. I could have said Nathan had an emergency. I could have blamed illness, an accident, anything. Instead, I told the truth. My fiancé isn't late. A few people exchanged confused glances. He isn't coming. The room exploded into whispers. I let them, then continued. This morning, Nathan left with another woman. Silence. Absolute silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Until a chair scraped loudly near the front row. Nathan's college roommate stood up. No, that's impossible. I calmly held up the handwritten note. This is what he left. Amelia projected the note onto the ballroom screens. People read it, one sentence at a time. Every excuse Nathan had hoped I would invent disappeared. Victoria buried her face in George's shoulder. My mother quietly took my hand. No one knew what to say. Then, from somewhere near the back, a slow clap echoed through the ballroom. Everyone turned. A woman in her 60s stood up, one of our oldest clients. She looked directly at me. Thank you for respecting us enough to tell the truth. One clap became 3, then 10. Then the entire ballroom erupted into applause. Not for a wedding, for honesty. Nathan had spent years believing appearances mattered more than truth. In less than 2 minutes, the truth had won. Or, so I thought. Because at that exact moment, the massive ballroom doors swung open. Nathan walked in, still wearing his tuxedo, Vanessa beside him, hand in hand. He looked around the room, saw 300 guests staring at him, then looked directly at me. And instead of apologizing, he smiled, as if this had gone exactly according to his plan. The applause died instantly. Every head turned toward the ballroom entrance. Nathan stood there, as though he were the guest of honor, instead of the man who had just abandoned his own wedding. Vanessa stood beside him, still wearing the ivory bridesmaid dress she'd mysteriously disappeared in an hour earlier. Her fingers were intertwined with his. Neither of them looked ashamed. Nathan actually smiled, slow, relaxed, confident, as if he'd walked into a room where everyone had been waiting to congratulate him. For one terrifying second, I wondered if he actually believed he could still control this. Then he opened his mouth. Claire. I'm glad you didn't lie. The ballroom fell silent again. I was afraid you'd make up some story. He looked around at the guests. I'm happy everyone knows the truth. A murmur rippled through the crowd. That wasn't the reaction anyone expected. Not even me. Nathan walked calmly toward the altar, almost casually, like he was late for a business meeting. He stopped only a few feet away from me. I should have handled this differently. He sighed. I know that. But marrying someone you no longer love would have been cruel. There it was. Not an apology. A performance. He wasn't trying to convince me. He was trying to convince everyone else. Vanessa stepped forward. I know everyone hates me. Her voice trembled just enough to sound believable, but no one chooses who they fall in love with. A few guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. She continued. We never planned for this. It just happened. Nathan immediately reached for her hand. I won't apologize for loving someone else. Another calculated sentence. He wasn't defending cheating. He was reframing it as honesty. A classic Nathan move. Take the ugliest truth, dress it in prettier words, and hope no one notices the difference. My father took one angry step forward. You've got some nerve. Nathan didn't even look at him. I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, my father snapped. I'm disgusted. Nathan nodded sympathetically. I probably would be too. Gaslighting. Always calm. Always reasonable. Making everyone else's emotions seem irrational. I'd watched him do it in boardrooms for years. This was simply a larger audience. Then he looked back at me. I never wanted today to become public. I almost laughed. You left me a note. You forced me. His smile faded slightly. I was trying to spare you. The room became deathly quiet. Spare me. He'd abandoned me 30 minutes before our wedding, and now he wanted credit for minimizing the damage. I looked directly at him. So tell everyone. He frowned. Tell them why you couldn't say goodbye to my face. Silence. Tell them why a handwritten note was easier than one honest conversation. Nathan's jaw tightened. It would have only made things harder. For who? Another silence. He never answered. Because everyone in the ballroom already knew. For him. Only him. Vanessa suddenly stepped in. This isn't fair. Every eye shifted toward her. You've all decided we're villains. No, I answered quietly. You decided that this morning. She folded her arms. You don't know what your relationship was really like. I nodded. You're right. You only know what Nathan told you. The words hit. Hard. She looked at Nathan, just briefly, almost instinctively. The first crack. Nathan recovered immediately. Claire, you've always been good with words. But let's not pretend this marriage was healthy. I never said it was. You checked every decision I made. Because someone had to. You questioned every investment. Because they involved our future. You never trusted me. I smiled sadly. I trusted you enough to build a life with you. I just didn't trust your math. Several guests chuckled despite themselves. Nathan noticed. His confidence slipped, only slightly. Trying to regain control, he reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone. I wasn't going to do this. But if we're telling stories, let's tell all of them. He turned the screen toward the guests. Photos. Me. Late dinners, coffee meetings, business lunches. With Elliot, over several years. A ripple spread through the ballroom. Nathan looked at everyone. Funny, isn't it? My own brother always seemed to be around. He turned back toward me. So before anyone judges me, maybe ask Claire why she spent so much time alone with Elliot. There it was, his real counterattack. Not denial, redirection. If he couldn't become innocent, he'd make me look guilty too. The whispers started immediately. Was she seeing Elliot? When were those taken? I knew something felt strange. Nathan slowly looked around the room. He could feel the narrative shifting again, exactly where he wanted it. He smiled, small, satisfied. Then, for the first time since he'd walked in, Elliot moved. He stepped between us. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just enough that Nathan could no longer look directly at me. Nathan laughed. Perfect timing. You've always enjoyed playing the hero. Elliot remained silent. Nathan leaned closer. Go on. Tell everyone you're innocent. Still nothing. Nathan's smile grew wider. I thought so. Then, Elliot finally spoke. Quietly, almost gently. I wasn't going to do this today. Nathan frowned. What? I wanted your parents to have at least one good memory left. He reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket and removed a slim black flash drive. Nathan's smile disappeared. Immediately. What is that? Elliot looked at him for several long seconds, then answered with a calmness that terrified Nathan far more than shouting ever could. The security footage. From the 29th floor. Nathan's face lost every trace of color, because whatever was on that drive, he clearly believed no one else was ever supposed to see it. Nathan didn't blink. He couldn't. His eyes locked onto the black flash drive in Elliot's hand, as if it were a loaded weapon. For the first time that afternoon, his confidence disappeared. Only for a heartbeat. Then the smile returned, smaller, sharper. You think a USB drive scares me? Elliot slipped it back into his pocket. It should. Nathan laughed. You've always loved theatrics. No, Elliot replied calmly. I've always preferred evidence. The ballroom had gone completely silent. 300 guests, dozens of executives, both families, every vendor. Nobody cared about the wedding anymore. They wanted to know what was on that drive. Nathan knew it too, which meant he had one chance left: attack first. He turned toward the crowd. You know what's interesting? He pointed at Elliot. My brother suddenly becomes a hero the exact same day my fiancé leaves me. He let the sentence hang, then looked directly at me. And somehow, the two of them already have all the answers. His voice remained calm, measured. Doesn't that seem convenient? The whispers returned immediately. Exactly what Nathan wanted. Confusion, doubt, not innocence. Just enough uncertainty to poison the truth. Vanessa looked from Nathan to Elliot, then to me. What is he talking about? Nathan answered before anyone else could. They've been planning this. My eyebrows lifted. Planning what? To humiliate me. He spread both arms dramatically. My own brother has wanted my position for years. And Claire? He smiled bitterly. She never forgave me for ending the engagement. I almost laughed. You ended the engagement? You walked out. I walked away from a relationship that died years ago. You walked away 30 minutes before the ceremony. A few guests quietly nodded. Nathan immediately corrected himself. I mean, emotionally. Gaslighting, reframing, trying to blur obvious facts into emotional opinions. Exactly as always. One of the board members finally stood. Enough. Everyone turned. It was Richard Vail, chairman of Northbridge Ventures, Northgate's largest institutional investor. He looked at Nathan. I have one question. Nathan forced another confident smile. Of course. When did you first know the wedding wasn't happening? Nathan hesitated. Today. Richard slowly nodded. Interesting. He pulled out his phone. Because my office received an email from you at 8:14 this morning. Nathan's face changed, just slightly. Richard continued. In that email, you apologized for canceling today's afternoon investor reception. You wrote that an unexpected personal situation had come up. Silence. The ceremony had been scheduled for 2. That email had been sent almost 6 hours earlier. Nathan already knew, long before Claire found the note. Vanessa slowly turned toward him. You knew this morning? Nathan swallowed. I wasn't sure. You booked flights, Richard interrupted. You canceled investor meetings. You postponed Monday's board presentation. You clearly knew. The room grew even quieter. Nathan looked trapped, but only for a second. Then he pivoted. I changed my mind. No, Richard replied. You changed your story. Nathan suddenly pointed at Elliot. This is exactly what you wanted. You've spent years waiting for me to fail. Elliot remained motionless. I've spent years waiting for you to tell the truth. Nathan laughed. There it is. The perfect older brother. The responsible one. The favorite. The words weren't aimed at Elliot. They were aimed at their parents. Victoria lowered her eyes. George remained silent. Nathan noticed. Good. He'd found another angle. You always compared us. Nathan's voice cracked just enough to sound real. Elliot never made mistakes. Elliot was always dependable. Elliot this. Elliot that. He looked around the ballroom. You know what that does to someone? For years, Nothing I achieved was enough. His breathing became heavier. So, yes, I wanted one thing that was finally mine. For one brief moment, the room actually felt sorry for him. Even I did. Because pain can explain behavior, it just doesn't excuse it. Then Elliot quietly spoke. I know. Nathan stopped. I know what it felt like. Confusion crossed Nathan's face. You do? I was there. A long silence followed. I remember Dad missing your baseball games because he was at my debate tournaments. I remember Mom hanging my awards in the hallway. I remember you pretending not to care. Nathan stared at him. Elliot's voice remained calm. I should have noticed how lonely you were. Another silence. Then, I just never imagined you'd spend the next 10 years punishing everyone else for it. The words landed like a hammer, not because they were cruel, because they were true. Nathan looked away first, only for a second. Then, almost desperately, he smiled again. You still don't have anything. Elliot tilted his head. What do you mean? Evidence. You keep talking about evidence, but nobody has seen it. He looked around confidently. As far as everyone here knows, you're bluffing. Several guests exchanged uncertain looks. He wasn't wrong. No one had seen the footage. Yet. Nathan sensed the momentum shifting back. He took one more step. Show it. He spread his arms. Right now. Show everyone. If you're telling the truth, prove it. The ballroom became completely silent. Every eye turned toward Elliot. He didn't move. He didn't answer. Nathan smiled, wider this time, because silence looked like weakness. Then, Elliot reached into his jacket, not for the flash drive, for his phone. He unlocked it, opened one email, turned the screen toward Nathan. Only Nathan could see it. Nobody else. Nathan read exactly one line. His entire body went rigid. His lips parted. Color drained from his face faster than it had when he abandoned the wedding. He whispered, almost too quietly for anyone else to hear. How did Fale get that? Elliot calmly locked his phone, then looked directly into his brother's eyes. I didn't send it. He paused. They did. Nathan frowned. They? Elliot didn't answer. Instead, he slowly turned toward the ballroom entrance. At that exact moment, 3 people walked through the doors. Richard Vale, Northbridge's general counsel, and a woman carrying a locked evidence case. She walked straight toward Elliot, placed the case in his hands, and quietly said the sentence that made Nathan realize this was never about a wedding anymore. Mr. Carter, the forensic recovery of the deleted surveillance footage is complete. Nathan didn't turn around. He didn't have to. The look on Elliot's face told him everything. Whatever had just arrived was real. Not a bluff, not another threat. Evidence. The kind that couldn't be argued with. The woman placed the locked evidence case on the nearest table. She unlocked it. Inside wasn't just the recovered surveillance footage. There were forensic reports, digital timelines, phone location records, access logs. Every document neatly tabbed, prepared, organized. Months of work. Nathan looked from the case to Elliot. You've been planning this. Elliot shook his head. No, you've been running from it. Richard Vale stepped forward. His voice remained calm. I think we've all heard enough speculation. He looked around the ballroom. If anyone here still believes today's story began 30 minutes ago, you're mistaken. He nodded toward the evidence case. It began almost 2 years ago. Nathan immediately interrupted. This has nothing to do with my wedding. Richard didn't even look at him. It has everything to do with your wedding. The ballroom fell silent. Because today's wedding was funded with money that should never have existed. A ripple spread through the guests. Nathan laughed. That's ridiculous. Our finances are clean. Richard slowly opened another folder. No, they're not. He removed several printed invoices. Luxury venue, designer jeweler, private jet deposits, exclusive honeymoon villa. Each invoice had one thing in common. Payment source, Northbridge Executive Partnership Program. Nathan's smile disappeared. Vanessa frowned. I thought those were executive benefits. Richard looked directly at her. They were not. Vanessa slowly turned toward Nathan. You told me your board approved everything. Nathan answered instantly. They did. Richard calmly interrupted. No. They specifically rejected it. Silence. Nathan looked ready to argue. Instead, Richard placed signed board minutes onto the table. Approval request. Denied. Denied again. Denied a third time. Every signature was there, Nathan's included. Vanessa stepped backward. You knew. It wasn't that simple. You lied. I protected us. No, she whispered. You protected yourself. Nathan realized he was losing her. Again. So he changed tactics. Fast. He pointed directly at Elliot. This is what you've wanted all along. My position. My company. My life. Elliot smiled faintly. If that's true, why didn't I take any of it when Dad offered it 8 years ago? Nathan froze. Victoria looked up sharply. What? George slowly closed his eyes. He already knew. The guests didn't. Nathan laughed nervously. He's lying. George spoke for the first time since Nathan walked into the ballroom. No. Everyone turned. George's voice sounded older than Claire had ever heard. I offered Elliot the CEO position. He refused. Nathan stared at his father. You never told me. George nodded. I know. I thought refusing would protect our family. He looked toward Elliot. It only protected your pride. The ballroom became painfully quiet. For years, Nathan had convinced himself Elliot wanted everything he had. Now, he discovered Elliot had already walked away from it once. The entire story he'd been telling himself collapsed. Still, Nathan wasn't finished. He couldn't afford to be. He looked toward the guests. So what? I lied. So what? I exaggerated. So what? No company was destroyed. No investor lost money. Richard didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the ballroom entrance. Please come in. 3 people entered, one after another. The first, Northbridge's external forensic auditor. The second, Northgate's insurance investigator. The third, Special Agent Melissa Grant. She carried a slim folder, nothing else. She stopped directly in front of Nathan. Mr. Carter. We've completed the forensic reconstruction. Nathan folded his arms. Congratulations. She ignored the sarcasm. Would you like to know what surprised us most? He said nothing. Melissa opened the folder. It wasn't the transfers. It wasn't the shell companies. It wasn't even the deleted surveillance footage. She looked directly into his eyes. The biggest surprise was discovering who reported you. Nathan frowned. Richard frowned. Even Elliot looked confused. Vanessa whispered, What? Melissa slowly placed a single printed email on top of the evidence case. Sender, Nathan Carter. Recipient, Federal Corporate Fraud Hotline. Date, 18 months earlier. Nathan's face went completely white. He grabbed the paper. This isn't possible. Melissa remained perfectly calm. It is. You anonymously reported suspected financial misconduct inside your own company. The ballroom erupted. Nathan shook his head violently. I never sent this! You did. We recovered it from your archived mailbox. Richard stared at him in disbelief. You investigated yourself? Nathan looked around desperately. No. His breathing became uneven. Finally, the truth came spilling out. I thought someone inside the company was stealing. Claire stared at him. What? Nathan laughed bitterly. I thought it was you. Silence. The room seemed to stop breathing. He looked directly at Claire. You questioned every payment. You rejected every proposal. You always knew where the money was. I convinced myself you were hiding something from me. Claire felt something inside her break, not because he had cheated, not because he had left, but because after 10 years together, the man she had loved had genuinely believed she was the enemy. Nathan lowered his head. So I filed the anonymous report. I thought investigators would expose you. His voice cracked. They did investigate. They just found me instead. No one spoke, because there was nothing left to say. Then Melissa Grant quietly closed the folder and looked at Nathan. Mr. Carter, there's one more person who has requested to speak with you before we conclude today's proceedings. Nathan looked up, his expression filled with confusion. Who? Melissa stepped aside. A gray-haired man slowly walked through the ballroom doors. The moment Nathan recognized him, his knees nearly gave out. It was the one person he had spent 2 years praying would never learn the truth. Nathan stopped breathing. His knees nearly buckled before he caught himself on the edge of a banquet table. The man walking toward him wasn't an FBI director. He wasn't a prosecutor. He wasn't another investor. He was Harold Mercer, the founder of Northbridge Ventures, the man who had built one of the largest private investment firms in the country. The man Nathan had spent years trying to impress. And the man who had personally sponsored Nathan's rise from an ambitious entrepreneur to CEO. Harold rarely appeared in public anymore. If he was here, it wasn't because of the wedding. It was because something far more important had died. Trust. Harold stopped a few feet away. He looked at Nathan for a long time, not with anger, not with disappointment, with sadness. I remember the first day we met. Nathan lowered his head. You told me you didn't care about becoming rich. You said you only wanted to build something people could be proud of. A long silence followed. I believed you. Nathan swallowed hard. Mr. Mercer. I can explain. Harold gently shook his head. No. You've spent 2 years explaining. What I came for was the truth. Nathan looked around the ballroom. 300 guests. His parents, Claire, Vanessa, Elliot, the board, federal investigators. There was nowhere left to hide. For the first time in his life, every version of the story he'd carefully built had collapsed. Only the truth remained. He slowly looked toward Claire. I never meant to destroy your life. Claire answered quietly. I believe that. Hope briefly appeared in Nathan's eyes. Then she continued. You just kept choosing yourself. Every single time you had to choose between protecting the truth or protecting your ego. The hope disappeared. Because she was right. Nathan looked at Elliot. I hated you. Elliot didn't answer. I convinced myself Dad loved you more. Silence. I convinced myself Claire respected you more. Still silence. So every time I failed, I blamed someone else. His voice cracked. I never realized the person I was competing against was the man I'd invented inside my own head. Victoria began crying quietly. George put an arm around her shoulders. Neither of them tried to defend their son anymore. There was nothing left to defend. Harold finally spoke again. Do you know the biggest mistake you made? Nathan gave a bitter laugh. I wouldn't know where to start. It wasn't the affair. It wasn't the shell company. It wasn't even the fraud. Nathan slowly looked up. Harold's voice remained calm. The biggest mistake was believing every problem could be solved by telling one more lie. The sentence settled over the ballroom like a verdict. No one argued, because everyone had watched it happen. One lie became two. Two became 10. 10 became a life. Special Agent Melissa Grant closed the investigation folder. Our criminal investigation will continue through the proper legal process. She looked around the room. But today's work here is finished. One by one, the investigators left. Then the attorneys. Then the board members. The ballroom slowly emptied. Not because anyone was asked to leave, because there was nothing left to witness. The wedding had ended hours ago. Now, the performance was over too. Vanessa quietly removed the engagement ring. She stared at it for several seconds, then placed it in Nathan's hand. I don't hate you. He looked at her. I just don't know who you are anymore. She walked away without looking back. Nathan didn't stop her. For once, he understood that some people leave because holding on would cost them too much. George approached Claire. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. He shook his head. I kept telling myself Nathan would eventually grow up. I ignored too many warning signs. He smiled sadly. You deserved a better family than the one we gave you. Claire gently squeezed his hand. I had one. George looked confused. She glanced toward Elliot. I just didn't realize it. After everyone else had gone, only Claire and Elliot remained inside the empty ballroom. Half-cleared tables, wilted flowers, an untouched wedding cake. Hours earlier, she had imagined dancing her first dance there. Instead, she stood in complete silence. Elliot walked beside her. Do you regret coming today? She thought about it, longer than he expected. No. If Nathan had disappeared quietly, I would have spent years wondering whether I wasn't enough. She looked around the room. Instead, I finally saw the truth. It was never about me. Elliot smiled faintly. It never was. They reached the center of the empty dance floor. The band had already gone. No music remained. Claire laughed softly. I guess I never got my first dance. Elliot hesitated, then quietly held out his hand. There isn't much of an audience left. She looked at him. There doesn't need to be. She placed her hand in his. No orchestra, no applause, no photographer. Just two people slowly swaying in the middle of an empty ballroom that had become something entirely different from what either of them expected. Sometimes, the moments no one plans become the ones people remember forever. Almost a year later, Claire and Elliot stood in a small stone chapel overlooking the Connecticut shoreline. Fewer than 40 guests. No media, no investors, no spectacle. George and Victoria sat in the front row, not because the past had been erased, because everyone had finally stopped pretending it hadn't happened. When the officiant asked whether anyone objected, the room remained perfectly silent. After the ceremony, Harold Mercer walked over with a simple envelope. Inside was the original investment agreement he'd signed with Northgate years earlier. He handed it to Claire. "I've spent decades in companies." He smiled. "I've learned they're only as strong as the character of the people leading them." He nodded toward Elliot. "Take good care of each other." "We will," Claire answered. Driving home that evening, Claire looked out the passenger window as the coastline disappeared behind them. "I used to think the worst day of my life was the day Nathan disappeared before our wedding." Elliot glanced at her. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I think it was the day my real life finally had room to begin." Some people will hear this story and say Nathan deserved everything that happened to him. Others will say he became the victim of his own insecurity, long before he became the victim of an investigation. Maybe both are true. But this story was never really about the man who walked away. It was about the woman who refused to let someone else's betrayal define